And we're live on YouTube. We got the recorder recording. Let's find the stream and I'll tweet it out. Let's see here. Okay. We got the live stream. We're tweeting it out. And we'll get our introduction going in 3, 2.
Warning. What you're about to listen to may not be politically correct.
William Jones, Adam Holmes. You're listening to the Jones and Holmes Show.
It's Saturday, June 9th, 2018. Jones and Holmes Show, episode number 18. And this is going to be quite the episode.
Yeah.
We have our guest today, Colin the Crypto Kid. And he's going to be talking all about cryptozoology.
We're real excited. This was one of our secret passions. At least one of mine. What about you, Jones?
Somewhat. Maybe. We'll see. I got a lot of questions. It's going to be fun. So how are you, Colin?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you guys?
Doing great.
We're doing great. So what, for everybody out there who's listening, and there's probably some who have never heard of this term, what is it that you research? What is it that you're passionate about?
So, cryptozoology is the study and search for new species of animals. It also kind of encompasses the idea that maybe some animals survived extinction, like the Tasmanian tiger, or some people think the dodo is still walking around. And it also includes animals showing up where they shouldn't be. Like mystery cats, that's a really big thing in the American South, especially with black panthers. Believe it or not, black panthers are not native to North America. The several species of cat that exist in North America, none of them are large enough to be reported as black panther, or they don't have the traits that allow them to become dark colored. So basically it's just looking at animal mysteries. When someone reports seeing something weird animal wise, it kind of falls into the cryptozoology category. It's got a lot of stuff. The biggest is definitely, Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, that kind of thing. And I look into all of that. I've done a lot of research.
This is interesting because, so I'm in Southeast Georgia. We never see, which the Black Panther would be just a variant of a cougar, right? The Florida Black Panther.
Well, so yes and no. So what Black Panthers actually are either leopards or jaguars. Leopards are the spotted cats in Africa, and jaguars are the spotted cats in South America that have a trait called melanism. Melanism is known in a variety of animals. Basically, all it does is takes the pigments in their skin or their fur and makes them darker. It's kind of like the opposite of albinoism, which is a bit better known because it's slightly more common in a lot more species. The Florida panther is a subspecies of the cougar, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Mountain lions. Mountain lions, other than the Florida panther, are not in the eastern side of the United States. They are not past the Mississippi on this side. Some vagrant mountain lions make their way over here, but that's not very common at all. And it's kind of difficult. But the thing is, melanism has never been seen in mountain lions ever. And there's been some studies that have suggested that maybe it's not actually possible. Maybe they just do not have the gene traits. It most certainly is not in the Florida panther. There are only about 100 individuals left. And we know all of them. Like we have trackers in, I think, almost all of them. We know pretty much where they are at all times because they're such an endangered species or subspecies. So the Black Panther reports are kind of a mystery, or sort of a mystery, as to what they are, at least in the eastern United States. There are a lot in Texas too, but there is, at least historically, up until I think 70 years ago, at least some existence of jaguars in the southern part of Texas. So it is sort of possible that there might be some actual Black Panthers in Texas.
Now,
I've heard of sightings of jaguars, the actual spotted ones in Arizona.
Yeah, there's that one
Yes,
that keeps
so
popping up.
there is a small breeding population of jaguars in Arizona. They are a big deal right now, because there's only a handful, and they don't go any further than the severe south of Arizona. So if you hear reports of the northern ones, that's actually really interesting zoologically, and there is a possibility that there are more in Arizona. And currently, as far as I know, the Fish and Wildlife Division of the Arizona government is working on trying to see if there actually are more jaguars, specifically like breeding pairs in the northern parts of Arizona, because large cats are vagrant animals, so that means they walk everywhere. They just kind of wander. So it is plausible for the ones in the very deep south of Arizona to just kind of make their way up north and then just come back down. But what zoologists are looking for is the more breeding pairs. There's only, I think, 3 breeding pairs in Arizona, and what that would mean is there's a more constant population in the state, which is important, and that's how we kind of determine the ranges of the big cats.
Cool. Well, here in Kentucky, we've actually we've had a few sightings of cougars or mountain lions or whatever you want to call them. In Kentucky, I believe there's actually a few pictures. Fish and Wildlife shot one back a few years ago, and I actually got to talking to one of the local game wardens around here, and because there's been a lot of reports of cat-like screams like coming from the woods at night, and people have people reported seeing them or hearing them, and it was interesting because one time, it's been back maybe 4 or 5 years ago now, and I was out hunting and I was getting out to my stand early in the morning, and sitting in my stand, and I heard a loud scream. And now I've grown up in the woods, so I'm a pretty avid outdoorsman, and I'm not one to go, oh, it's Bigfoot, it's whatever, screaming. I'm pretty rational when it comes to woods, and in my mind, there's a lot of farms in the area. I went, more than likely it's a donkey or some farm animal making a weird noise. I've heard donkeys make some strange noises in the past. I've heard, cows make some strange noises. But so I kind of just disregarded it. But in my mind, I was thinking, that sounds a lot like a cat. Well, come a few months later, and I get to talking to a friend of mine who works for an organization that takes underprivileged kids, and they take them hunting and fishing and take them out to do things in the outdoors. And he said, I was just talking to him, and out of nowhere he says, so have you heard any of the cats? And I was like, what are you talking about? And he said, well, we've been out, we've taken kids on camping trips in eastern Kentucky, and so far we have spooked up 2 mountain lions. And I thought, man, that's interesting that you've done that. That they actually, they were seen by a group of people. And I thought, man, that is really strange that, we're seeing them. And then the funniest thing about it is the fact that the UK college basketball team, their mascot is the Wildcat. So I thought that was interesting. So just a weird little tie in there.
Well, so the eastern United States used to have its own subspecies of cougar. up until now. The date's a little fuzzy because we aren't quite sure exactly when they went extinct, but we have a vague idea. Somewhere in the late 1800s, early 1900s, they got hunted out to extinction. But stories remained, and it's become a big part of folklore, especially where I am in Ohio, Kentucky, West Virginia, especially, and PA. You talk to anybody in those states who lives out in the country, and 9 times out of 10, they will tell you flat out, mountain lions are here. And I live in the country in Ohio, Northeast Ohio, and I've had conversations with my neighbors, most of whom are farmers, about mountain lions. And some of them didn't even know that the mountain lion technically should not be here because they've seen them. They've dealt with loss of livestock from them before. So
they thought that this was like a normal occurrence.
Exactly. And that's kind of the mindset in a lot of places. That they're just kind of here. They just assume that they're a part of the natural thing, and they used to be, but at this point they shouldn't be. Now, what I personally think is as to why that is not that we didn't kill off all the eastern cougars. I am 99% sure we definitely did, but I think what happened is we also started killing the western species of cougar, so they just kind of moved and spread out into the eastern side as well. I'm pretty sure that that's why we see them more. Officially, though, the only mountain lions that we should have here, excluding the Florida panther, are just vagrants, looking for food, looking for mates, that type of thing. Some of them get pretty far. There was one that went from the southern part of the Sierra Mountains all the way up to Vermont before it got killed.
I remember seeing that story about that.
There was this excellent book about the panther, about the cougar and its trip, called Heart of a Lion. And to anyone interested in the subject, I highly recommend it. It's a beautiful book about mountain lions in general and kind of the things we've done to them. It's pretty gruesome, that the things we've done. But anyway, so honestly, I think that the whole mountain lion thing isn't quite cryptozoology as much as just kind of a zoological thing that amateurs kind of have to get across to the government and other scientists that they are still here, because I'm pretty convinced they still are. In breeding populations, not just vagrants. And it's getting through. Michigan last year actually officially said we do have breeding populations of mountain lions. And that was a big deal because we're talking not the northern half of Michigan, we're talking the mitten part of Michigan. So if there are breeding populations there, even if we don't have breeding populations in, say, Ohio, they definitely are coming down here just because they have enormous ranges.
I've been trying to find in the background my friend down here, Mike, the boiled peanut man. When I first came here and set up a Facebook page and started adding some of the local people, one of the picture floating around was a game camera that showed a cougar, walking through the woods. But then there's another photo along with it that showed what looked like a black panther. And he ended up being the one that got it on his game camera. And after I figured it out that it was him, and I actually met him in person, I was talking to him, and he pulled his phone out and he had the photos saved. And I've been trying to find them, but it was a black panther, man, walking across. I don't know what. I mean, I guess that's just one that's just walked an incredible distance.
Well, like I said, cougars are not confirmed to be melanistic. We don't know if they can be black, and honestly, scientists are pretty sure they can't.
Right.
Generally, when people get pictures of what they think are black panthers, or even when they see what they think are black panthers, what it actually is just a house cat. So
see, but this thing was like an
are
incredibly clear. If I could find this photo, it was just like a very clear photo of this thing.
Well, keep looking for it while we get into some other stuff too.
Well, another explanation is cougars. One of their camouflage techniques is their fur is actually really reflectant. So the way their fur works is when light hits it in the right way, they can look a lot darker than they actually are, even to be completely black. It's the same type of optical illusion that the white and gold and black and blue dress from a couple years ago. Right. It's the same type of optical illusion that caused that debate. So even in photographs and stuff, these regular cougars could look black, depending on the circumstances, which is what causes almost all of the Black Panther sightings.
Interesting.
It is.
Well, since this is you're a cryptozoology guy, let's get into some crypto stuff.
Yeah.
What's on your radar these days? Anything specific?
Well, actually, most of my focus has been on mystery predation. So, different attacks on animals that appear to be weird or from some kind of weird animal. Mm-hmm. I recently kind of shut that book for a bit. I've written dozens of articles about it. I've done a lot of episodes of my old radio show about it. And I have given a lot of lectures about it, but I've kind of put that away for now, partially because it was frustrating me because I was working on a book about it. And what ended up happening is I didn't have quite enough information to get a full-length book, at least in America. So I would have to expand to the UK and Australia, which would mean doing newspaper research, which would be difficult without actually going to those countries. So I've kind of drifted away from that into, honestly, I don't really have a lot of focus cryptozoologically right now. I have a lot of research and I've written extensively on a variety of topics within it. But right now I'm just kind of floating around writing and talking about whatever interests me at the moment.
It's like our podcast.
So, yeah, exactly. So like, if you guys have specific questions or want to talk about like some kind of specific weird thing, feel free to shoot them at me. If I don't know the answer, I at least know somebody or a book that could give you an answer, or I would recommend about the topic. So I have a wide range of knowledge. So just start shooting questions at me.
Okay, so I got one for you.
Okay.
Oh, what do you got, Jones?
I'm just wondering what's an example of like you said, like an animal attack where it's kind of an unknown predator. What's a current good example?
The most popular and the best known is the chupacabra, which frustrates me to no
I'm so excited now.
Everybody loves the chupacabra, but what drives me nuts is the case has been effectively closed on the chupacabra. There's no real mystery associated to it anymore. Any of the stories that are brought up now are just people shooting animals with mange or catching animals with mange and calling it chupacabra. Exactly, like every single one of those. All of those are raccoons or dogs or coyotes or coy dogs with mange. I can guarantee it. Or actually, there's a handful of bears on the page as well. Animals without hair look weird. And when it looks weird, people assume it's a monster.
Yeah, man. But I got a German Shepherd that looks like this. She's like this incurable. We've tried all sorts of things, but she's pretty weird looking.
The original chupacabra was this gargoyle-like thing with spines on its back, and it's kind of humanoid-ish.
Right, that's what I always thought of. Like whenever I heard people talking about it. Yeah.
Well, that That the first report was in April of '95 in Puerto Rico, after a whole rash of weird attacks on animals in Puerto Rico. People were freaking out. The animals that were being killed were claimed to be drained of blood. But now I don't want to get terribly into this because I'm not the one who did the research. Ben Radford did. If you're interested in the chupacabra and what it actually is and the actual explanations, because it's not a mystery. There's no real mystery to it. Read Tracking the Chupacabra by Ben Radford. It pretty much figures it all out and explains it in a really good way, in much more depth than I could at this point. But essentially, Ben figured out that the person who first saw the creature had been influenced by the movie Species. So when they saw something that they couldn't quite identify, regardless of what it was, their brain immediately went to the movie Species, which was set partially in Puerto Rico, to Syl, the spine alien thing from the movie. And that influenced their encounter. And because their encounter and the sketches from it were so popularized, like immediately after, every other following story was exactly like that. It was just people misidentifying things and attaching that image to whatever they saw. Now, the animals that were attacked, generally, which are generally what researchers say, maybe the sightings weren't understood, were misidentifications, but the animals were still attacked. Yes, the animals were attacked, but they were probably attacked by dogs. So
now, I see the one there that was killed in Kentucky. That was
that's this one, right?
A little more to the left. Yep, that one there. That was
a
not far
raccoon.
from my house. Yeah.
That was a raccoon.
Wow, that's crazy. A hairless raccoon looks like that. It looks so similar to a dog.
But look at the teeth. The teeth look exactly like a raccoon.
Yeah, that's wild looking.
That's because they're actually fairly closely related. They're within the family of Carnivora, or Carnivoria, which includes like cats and weasels and raccoons and dogs. So all of them kind of look similar. So that's why it looked like a dog, but it's a raccoon. Now back to the animals that were attacked. The almost Hail Mary of the chupacabra is that they were drained of blood, right? Yeah. Chupacabra means goat sucker in Spanish. And it's supposedly a vampire creature. Well, when an animal dies, when anything dies, people, animals, whatnot, the blood inside them thickens. It pools at the bottom, and kind of becomes almost this gelatinous mass inside the body. And unless you're specifically trained in veterinary autopsy, it's almost impossible to tell whether or not the animal is actually exsanguinated. Meaning the reports, the animals that were killed by known animals that just killed them and dropped them, because that does happen quite a lot. It's called surplus killing, animals that kill more than they need to.
Yeah, we've seen wolves do that in the past.
It's a survival trait.
And I just had that happen with, what was it, Wednesday? I think it was Wednesday when I came out and I have 6 ducks in a pen, and they haven't been bothered in over a year. And we come out and notice there's only 3, and they're acting weird, and there's 1 dead. So whatever came in, it came in under the pen. It killed 3 of them, left 1 of them, drugged 2 of them off, and just left.
Did the one was the one missing its head?
Nope, had its head. See, I had the weirdest one I had. Well, one thing, like you said about being drained of blood, this duck, I mean, within hours, just laying on the ground where it was, what some people don't realize is insects, maggots, bugs, they're eating that thing from the inside out within hours. And I picked it up.
Oh God, yes. And lividity only takes about, depending on the size of the animal, 45 minutes to 2 hours to fully go into effect.
Right.
So it happens a lot faster than I think a lot of people realize. So even if you pick up the animal, shake it around, and start stabbing it, blood, unless you hit exactly where it is, blood will not come out. And even if you do, the blood is clotted, so it probably will not come out like spraying like you would expect.
Right. And it's so stiff. And when I picked it, as soon as I pick it up, just, maggots are just dropping out of it. And so something's going to be drained pretty quick. Now, the weirdest one we had was I had chickens for about 6 months. I raised them from chicks. So when they were around 6 months old, I went out to go feed my goats. And I'm like, man, these chickens are quiet. And I turn around and look, and it was 10 hens and a rooster. And all of them were just dead. None of them were eaten. None of them were pulled apart. They're all just dead. And the only thing that I could find, I didn't find any digging underneath of a pen. I couldn't really find anything where it got in, whatever it was. But there was just like 2 marks on a neck, like two blood marks, that was about it. Like 2 teeth marks.
So dogs and cats, nearly every species will go for the neck, go for the throat, and they'll just bite and leave. Oftentimes the only teeth that actually penetrate are the canines, which cause the 2 puncture wounds like the vampire.
Right.
Which helps the idea that the animals were drained of blood. But that's entirely normal predation. And part of the problem is people don't know this stuff, so they immediately think it's weird. Yeah. And part of the problem within cryptozoology is cryptozoologists are not trained to recognize this. They aren't, and they don't do the research initially to figure out and be familiar with this stuff, to be able to accurately tell if this attack was weird or not. And I think part of that is because a lot of cryptozoologists don't want to know whether or not it's a real animal. They just want to automatically assume it's something weird, which is a whole other discussion.
Yeah, because people they like that. They like to think that they found something no one else has found, and that it's some crazy
vampiric
animal.
Predator.
Right. And usually, you want to, it's like Occam's razor, right? The simplest explanation is usually correct.
Exactly.
With these things. And Adam and I, man, we deal with a lot of dead animals because we just have we've always had a lot of animals around. And,
we live in the country.
Right. And I've seen, like, I had a little goat that broke its leg, and we had it stinted, but he just didn't make it. He just got too weak. And after a day or two, he passed away. So I buried him underneath a crepe myrtle tree that fell over in a freak ice storm down here in southeast Georgia. So I lifted the crepe myrtle, put him underneath of it, figured, you know what, reuse them as fertilizer. So this thing's up for months. So this goat's underground for months. And then one of the horses messed up the bracing that was holding this tree up, and it fell back down. So I go out there to start pulling up, and this tree fell down, and within a day, something came and took this body of a goat, just months old, rotting, whatever, just took it, gone.
Yep, don't take
animals, long. Man, they're animals.
Exactly. It's interesting, especially like you were talking about, like people talking about the absence of blood. I hunt a lot for my food. Me and my family try to eat as healthy as we can, and one of those ways is we try to harvest 1 or 2 deer a year, and we eat on that. We got a big freezer, we keep it in there, and we raise our own chickens for eggs, and we have a decent sized garden, and so anyway, but if you shoot a deer, typically, whether it's with a bow or a rifle, I shot a deer a few years ago that I remember after shooting the deer with a rifle, in a matter of, I would give it 2 minutes, that deer, it dropped instantly. Within 2 minutes, the deer was completely bled out, and the blood had soaked into the ground to the point where you almost couldn't even see it anymore. And once we had picked the deer up, you almost couldn't even tell that there was a death there. There was no massive trauma of blood everywhere. And I've come across coyote kills of like farm animals before, and it's amazing how very little carnage is actually there. They clean it up quickly.
I think that a lot of people, just general public, do not give predators quite enough credit.
Yeah.
They like the big cats are always talked about being some of the most efficient killers, but and they definitely are. But at the same time, I think coyotes are just as efficient.
Oh yeah.
I've seen reports of a pack of 3 coyotes annihilating over 150 chickens within an hour and a half.
Yeah, I believe that. I've seen my own dog. I've had instances where my own dog has killed some of my chickens and killed 6 of them in a matter of, 10 minutes, with absolutely no problem.
Mine just started too.
Large dogs that get out, if their hunting instincts kick in, they can take down a cow. Not a lot of people know that, but like a good sized dog, a larger dog, can take down a cow. A lot of these predators are incredibly skilled, and they have to be because they only succeed generally sweeping value of 20% of the time when they attack something. So when they get it, they have to kill it fast and efficiently to actually get their kill.
Right. The same way even now as humans, and when we hunt, we want the most ethical, quick, clean kill that we can get. There's no, the last thing you want is for a wounded animal to be running off. And for one, you feel horrible about it. And two, it ruins the meat. So so the whole point of killing something is to do it quickly and not to sit there and play with it. And like you said, that's what predators do. They're out to kill. That's what they want to do. So very interesting.
It is.
I want to throw something your way. I'm going to swing the subject a little bit here.
Sure.
I just want your opinion on this, and whether this makes you mad or you laugh, whatever. What do you think of the Patterson-Gimlin footage?
All right. So, for your listeners, I am of the up and coming generation of cryptozoologists. So when the field started, and I am definitely answering this, I swear, but my whole answer kind of revolves around this thing.
Right.
When the field started, it really got swinging in the 50s. That was the first generation. They were big until the 70s. Then you have the next generation that are the big old, that are like the wise researchers that everyone respects now, from the 80s until the early 2000s. Then you have the big and famous people now, which are the current generation, like Ken Gerhard and Nick Redfern, who have been doing this since the late 90s until now. And then you have my generation. I am only 17. I am young, definitely, but I have a lot of credentials behind me. So your listeners, I hope they don't just stop listening when they find out how old I am. But I am of the up-and-coming generation. Now, up until the generation, like my generation of researcher, the Patterson-Gimlin film has been basically worshipped as the biggest and the best piece of evidence for Bigfoot we have. For those of your listeners who might not be familiar, it's the video of Bigfoot where it walks next to a creek and it has that famous Bigfoot pose where it stares at the camera. Most people have only seen that one frame. I think it's like frame 352 of the film. But
you mean the one where it looks like a man in a monkey suit?
Yeah, where it turns at the camera and looks straight at it. So there's been not hundreds, but there's been dozens and dozens of separate analyses of the Patterson-Gimlin film throughout the years. It was recorded on October 20th, 1967, and by these two dudes, Roger Patterson, who has been dead since the 70s, I think, and Bob Gimlin, who's still around, a pretty big part of the community. I've gotten to meet him. He's a wonderful, wonderful guy.
Oh, we should get him on the show.
But the film has been analyzed by dozens and dozens of researchers, scientists, video analysts, all kinds of people, and no one seems to be able to tell what it is. Like, even the most hardcore skeptics will say they can't prove that it's a man in a suit, but they feel it is. So a lot of the Bigfoot researchers take that as, it's never been disproven, so it must be true. It's the best piece of evidence. I disagree. I think that, I personally think it probably is somebody in a suit. Now, I'd like to clarify that by saying that if it is fake, that it wasn't faked. It was only faked by Roger Patterson. Bob Giblin genuinely believes what he saw is real, and I do not think that man is lying about being involved with the hoax. I think he genuinely believes that what he saw is Bigfoot. And I completely trust Patterson. I completely trust Giblin, but Patterson was kind of a shuckster in general.
Yeah, he was known for that.
Exactly. And
what were they
like
filming?
right after
what were they doing?
This expedition that he went out was, he started telling everybody, hey, I'm going to go catch Bigfoot with this film camera.
Huh.
And then he happened to. Right. He and then right after he got it, he started going around to all kinds of like circuses and freak shows and libraries and all kinds of places, charging, I think like it was 75 cents a head to see the video, kind of like the Minnesota Iceman, right? He just kind of went all over the place saying, hey, I have the best piece of evidence for Sasquatch, for the famed Bigfoot, which makes you question it. My perspective on the Patterson Giblin film, to be completely honest, is if the Bigfoot field is ever going to advance, we need to learn to shut up about it. Nothing is ever going to be determined either way. Neither side is going to relent, and there's never going to be proof of it being fake or it being real, ever. I'm absolutely convinced that you will never prove that it's real, and they will never prove that it's fake. So I think we should really stop talking about it, because it's not as good of a piece of evidence that people say it is. There's a lot more interesting pieces of evidence that exist, a lot more physical, that are a lot harder to fake, if they are fake, that are being debated and discussed, that are more likely to be proven either way.
What's a good
such as
example
the Skookum cast. If you want to look that up, it's a SKOO. Crap. I think it's KUM.
We'll find
Yeah.
something. There we go.
There you go.
It's a really interesting. So it's a full body cast, supposedly, of a Bigfoot leaning into mud to reach for something. I'm not quite sure what it is, but I think that if it is real, it's a lot better of a piece of evidence than the Patterson Giblin film.
Now, how old are they saying this cast is?
2001.
Okay.
Isn't that
Now-
Dr. Meldrum there with it?
That is
That's
Dr.
good.
Meldrum right there.
Yeah.
Now, I personally also think that the Skookum cast is more likely to be a deer laying down, but I also do not have the same level of credentials that some of the primatologists that have studied this have. So
See, I'm just not. I'm just
Well,
not seeing it.
there's a picture of so the right there explains where the different parts of the body is, and then two pictures on from that is what it looks like, what they theorize the creature looked like leaning into the mud. but it's a little sketchy. The story behind it is this group went out bigfooting in Skookum, Washington, and what they did was they made these mud rings around pile of apples, right, in hopes to like bait Bigfoot into walking through the mud to get some tracks. But instead, they got it leaning into it to grab it. Their explanation of why it leaned instead of just walking through the mud is that it didn't want to leave tracks, which is a little questionable because it left a bigger track. And also, why would an ape care if it left tracks or not? You know what I'm saying?
Right. Well, see, I think that's like you get a lot of argument within the Bigfoot community of like, I mean, it goes it ranges from this is a giant ape to this is an interdimensional being that can sense cameras and can, is so smart that it won't leave scat or tracks or,
right.
It gets crazy.
Bigfoot. See, I started in cryptozoology partially because of my fascination with Bigfoot, but the more and more I'm involved with it, the less and less I really care. Partially because the researchers and the people involved make it so hard to try to figure out what it is because there's so much infighting and there's so much just argument and fighting and just people not being courteous in the field about what this thing is or the different ideas or the evidence. And it just kind of has set me off the whole topic of Bigfoot. So I've kind of drifted into other things. Or that's also why I kind of floated into the historical stuff. I do a lot with newspaper research. I do a lot with looking at the folklore behind these things. And basically what that means is I don't have to talk to witnesses. I don't have to talk to other researchers. I can just sit on my laptop or in the library going through old newspaper files looking for things. There's less fighting and argument involved. And I think that's kind of a bad thing about cryptozoology. And I can elaborate a bit more if you want, but like it can put people off who are really genuinely interested in this stuff just because of all the fighting and the arguments and the problems and the drama.
Well, interestingly enough, you kind of get that. It doesn't really matter what field you go into.
Yep.
You get it in everything.
Well, the thing is, though, like, at least in academics, it's like a bit more courteous. Like, you can hate someone's guts, but at least you will hate their guts with evidence. Like with Bigfoot stuff, it's just my opinion is better than your opinion. With academics and science and stuff, which is what I've slowly been drawn to more, if you couldn't tell already by some of the things I've talked about, they at least argue and fight with evidence and talk about the things more than attack the person. And that's a bit more palatable to me than the just infighting over this person's not reliable, they're a hoaxer type thing.
Mm-hmm. I'll give you an example. I'm in the automotive industry. I run a performance automotive shop, and we do a lot of performance, race cars, things like that. So there's the modern or the late model V8 engine that GM uses has two different styles of cylinder head. They have what's called a cathedral port, and they have what's called a rectangle port. There are literally groups on Facebook. There's one called the Cathedral Port Mafia, and these people argue over which cylinder head is better. Now, here's where it gets interesting, though, because an engine is basically an air pump that was created out of a giant mathematical equation. You can measure the efficiency of those two parts. Like you said, with Bigfoot, you can't measure an opinion. There's not something. When it comes to an opinion, I guess you can have a reason why you have that opinion. Typically, I like to have an opinion that's based off of factual evidence. I don't know. It gets ridiculous. At the end of the day, it gets crazy, the amount of arguing that goes on. I mean, you can watch the Bigfoot shows like on the Discovery Channel, and it's like an hour of 4 or 5 different scientists with 4 or 5 different opinions each, all arguing over why they think Bigfoot is this or Bigfoot is that, and Bigfoot does this and Bigfoot does that. But in reality, it's not like we actually have good video evidence of an actual animal out there.
The thing is, with a lot of the shows, most of those guys aren't actual scientists. The handful of scientists that are involved, like Dr. Meldrum and the late Dr. Bindernagel, who passed away a couple months ago, they generally agreed about things. They looked at the evidence and generally agreed, and they could back up why they agreed and why they felt this way. The Bigfoot community specifically is populated 9 times out of 10, not even 9 times out of 10. It's more like 99 times out of 100 by people who do not have formal scientific training, which is fine. I'm an amateur as well. Like I'm not even out of high school yet, but they don't do the legwork to research actual science. They don't take the time to first educate themselves on these on zoology and wilderness and biology and how things are, and we know they are, before they just go out into the woods and start squatching. That's where the opinion argument comes from, because these people, and I have to say, I am part of the community. A lot of the people involved are not informed enough with biology, zoology, wilderness, wildlife, all that stuff, to be able to make an informed opinion. All that they know is their own experience, which experience is important, but science has the understanding of the natural world. And if you don't understand the natural world, it can be almost impossible to determine if something's a mystery or not.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, it is. All right. So on scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the least likely, 10 being the most likely, what's your opinion? Does it exist?
On Bigfoot or the Patterson-Gimlin film?
Bigfoot.
I have to give it a 3. I think some of the footprints are interesting, but I think that the thing is, even though there's a lot of wilderness in some of the areas that Bigfoot's said to be, it's not quite enough wilderness for large primates to survive undetected.
And also, what about the climate?
I mean, gorilla.
What did you say, Jones?
Like the climate, just the North American climate in general for primates.
Yeah. Winters would be really bad for them because primates, with the exception of us, most of their diet comes from plants, and where Bigfoot would be mostly Washington, California, and Canada, in Oregon, all of which have like pretty severe winters in the areas that they would be at, with not a lot of food for them during the winter. And primates have big brains, and with big brains you need a lot of food to survive. We're talking 8 feet tall animals here. It would need to eat more than gorillas do daily to survive, and we would see that. A breeding population that with that range would have to be at least 1,000, if not more. And we would see the effects at the very least.
What kind of temperatures do gorillas? What's their climate? Like their temperature range?
They live in a tropical jungle, so it's like they're the Congo, and I mean that the whole rainforest area, that it's very warm, even in the mountains.
Right.
The air's thinner, but it's very warm year round. There's constant food for them, and it's also very wet. I mean, it's a rainforest,
and it's like South America, similar.
So, yeah, Africa.
Right, and I'm saying with primates in general, South America's has that similar climate with the jungle climate, which is going to be, and even here in the United States, we have wild populations, a couple pockets of primates. You have Ocala, Florida. Where
around Clearwater. I forgot.
But none of none of those are native, and Florida's pretty warm too.
And that's one of the most interesting ones. Have you ever heard of Morgan Island, South Carolina?
Yeah. Yep. I've been there. Like, not on the island, but like we're in that area.
Man, we want to take a boat. We were talking about it sometime just to see how, because you can't get on the island, but you can go, ride past it on a boat and to see all these hepatitis monkeys running around. That'd be a good one, man. Hepatitis monkeys. But the ones in Florida, they just did something with them. They passed some law dealing with them because they can't get rid of them. They keep multiplying.
Well, the thing is, though, like, Florida is a bad place for an 8-foot tall primate to be.
Yeah.
If it is like hypothetically, it would have to be in the Everglades, and the Everglades is a river. It's a slow moving river, and wetlands, and that's just not a good environment for primates at all.
Right.
Especially land dwelling primates. And there's alligators all over the place in the water. They'd have to swim all the time, and alligators are not nice.
That was the last podcast we did. We had a couple stories of there's been some crazy alligator stories.
I've always been fascinated with the crocodilians because my brother used to live in Florida, and I love to fish, and we would go down there and we'd fish the areas around his house. And I've actually caught, not intentionally, but I've caught 2 alligators on rod and reel, topwater fishing around Lake Toho and in Central Florida, and where we were literally just topwater lures, popping them through the water. Next thing you know, alligator snatches it. You set the hook and you grab it. And so they were little alligators, nothing big. They were small enough to where we could reel them in, grab them by the tail, use a pair of pliers, get the hook out, and let them go. But it was interesting, just like how many of those things are down there. And I took my wife and my son out on a boat one day. Oh, I say a boat. It was a raft.
Oh, we got to tell them the story.
Inflatable raft that we took out into Lake Toho, and so we're out there, and we just hear this giant commotion, maybe 40 yards from the boat. We turn around and we look, and I've seen the biggest alligator I've probably ever seen in the wild, and it was swimming away from us, but it had splashed. I think it had like attacked a bird or something, and it turned around and was swimming away from us. But I know my wife wasn't too happy about it. She just wanted to get out of the water like as quickly as possible. I was fascinated. I was like, wow, look at the size of that monster. And that's the one thing that I've always found interesting is that we love to create scary monsters. Like, we love to create the Bigfoot, the Chupacabra, the Ohio Grassman. We create all these things in our minds, and when we're out in the wilderness. But in reality, there's some real monsters out there. I mean, there's alligators. Bears is one of the things we like to talk about quite a bit. Bears, wolves. I mean, these are some real killers. I mean, some brutal, predators. I think they're a little scarier than, the Ohio Grassman.
I think part of the thing is cryptids are being treated as real animals before they're proven it to actually be real animals. Mm-hmm. When in fact they should be treated as folklore. Mm-hmm. That's how I look at it. And I think part of the reason that so many of these things turn out to be just known animals is because people underestimate what the animal kingdom can do. Mm-hmm. Even animals that everybody knows about are just incredible, and people underestimate them all the time.
Yeah. They now what do you think of like the Native American accounts of stories that have been passed down over time?
So every culture in the world has stories of wild men, right? Which are
Mhm.
effectively Bigfoot creatures. It is what's known as a folkloric trope. Um, that is basically because, honestly, the general consensus is the reason these stories exist in every culture is because when we were still expanding out of Eastern Africa, when Homo sapiens were brand new, um, there were other there were other hominins around. There were other humans, um, meaning uh, we interacted with effectively wild men, and the stories just kind of got carried and twisted into folklore tidbits. I think honestly, the use of saying different Native American accounts are um, Bigfoot stories is kind of borderline cultural appropriation. They're taking these stories from different cultures without an understanding of the cultural importance and the folkloric importance of these stories, and just putting a label on them of some, in their mind, real animal and using that as proof. Um, it bothers me, um, and I think too many people do it. Uh, yes, a lot of the creatures in folklore have um, origins in the animal kingdom. For example, cyclopses are almost certainly due to people seeing mammoth skulls and elephant skulls and assuming that it's just a giant human with a single eye. Um,
Hmm.
but even then, the creatures are treated with a lot more cultural respect than the Bigfoot community does with Native American accounts, Native American stories. Um, I think also part of the problem is there are literally hundreds of tribes. Um, Many of them are completely different culturally, socially, everything, to the point where saying just Native American sweeping over is like saying Asian. When talking about mythology and culture, they're so vastly different from each other that it's kind of ignoring their differences, and just kind of cramming them all into the same cup. And you wouldn't do that with any other culture.
Right,
Um,
and that's interesting because a lot of people don't think of them the as the Indian nations. The interesting thing is like for me, um, we've traced my family's the family tree back quite a ways, and on my dad's side of the family, we've we found record of both Sioux and Cherokee Indian, and people go, "Oh, well, you're Indian." Well, it's two separate people groups,
yeah,
but
it's like saying like I personally have uh some English in me and some German, and that's just like saying, well, you're European.
right. But it's interesting because the one thing I've thought about, like, do you think the Gigantopithecus was a real thing?
Of course, we have fossils. We
Right.
have teeth and jawbones. It was a real animal.
So
For listeners that don't know, Gigantopithecus was a 8 to 10 foot tall orangutan like animal. Um, it lived in India about 1.2 million years ago to 400,000 years ago. My numbers might be a little off. And it's commonly used as like, well, this has got to be what Bigfoot is. Sorry, continue.
now, um, do you think that the stories that different people groups have of these giant animals could be stories of Gigantopithecus that could have been seen by people?
I think the culture, like the folklore, could have that as one of the origins in certain areas as well. The animal is carried around as like, this has got to be what Bigfoot is, which makes no sense to me because one, they were quadrupedal. They walked like gorillas do. Two, they looked more like orangutans instead of gorillas, which is a lot more similar. Like gorillas look facially more similar to Bigfoot. Exactly, that's exactly what they look like. And three, their primary diet was bamboo. And to be Bigfoot, they would have to go up across the Gobi Desert, across some of the worst parts of Russia, through the Bering Strait, and down through Canada to be Bigfoot. And they ate bamboo. There's not a lot of bamboo forests in the Gobi Desert in Russia.
Right.
Well, this is also, this would have been, if this was so long ago, haven't they found evidence of palm tree fossils in Canada? So we had a vastly different climate at some point in time. But was that climate?
I think that was back when the dinosaurs were around.
So it's a vastly different time frame.
Oh God, yes.
So it's, yeah, it's such an interesting thing to see what kind of crazy climate changes we've had over time, you know?
I mean, yeah. I'm especially interested in like just the animals that survived in the past. And most of them, as much as people want them to still be around, couldn't survive in our environment today.
Right.
Not even because people are here, just simply because it's vastly different. Like dinosaurs, for example. Now, dinosaurs were around for, I think a lot of people underestimate how long they were around. Even just the Cretaceous period lasted longer than humans have been on Earth, like by 100-fold. So dinosaurs were around for a really long time. They had a variety of different world climates and environments. And as far as I know, pretty much all of them are completely unlike anything we have today. So Jurassic Park, just that alone, even if we had some way to clone them, just isn't really feasible.
Right,
now, what do you think of that that aquatic dinosaur-like thing that was pulled out in Japan in the late 70s? Have you ever seen that?
Oh, yeah, the Zoyu Maru carcass.
Yeah, I can't remember what year that was. I believe it was the late 70s.
Yeah, I think that you're right. That was a basking shark. That was absolutely a basking shark. They
is this one here?
the reason it
Yeah,
the reason it looked like a plesiosaur is when animals die and decompose, they look really weird, which is why there are so many reports of like just weird animals being washed up on shores and stuff, especially aquatic mammals and fish, large fish. Basking sharks are especially well known because for these type of things because they're enormous.
pull up a basket shark. Really?
They're the second largest shark, and they look really weird. They decompose really weird, and they can cause a lot of different weird looking shapes. And so the reason it looked like a plesiosaur, which is actually not a dinosaur, it was the long-necked reptile in the ocean during the Jurassic period. The reason it looked like a plesiosaur is just simply because that's the way it happened to decompose. These things happen several times a year. Like there have been a couple floating around from England and one from Ireland just earlier this year. Two of which were two different types of porpoise, like dolphin-like animals, and one was a basking shark. And there's one that washed up in off the coast, I think West Africa, and that was a just another basking shark. These things happen a lot more common than people think.
Do you know what the one that washed up in? This is like 20 minutes away from me.
I remember that.
Yeah.
I don't see. I remember it, but I don't remember exactly what it was identified as. I vaguely
they ever did.
remember hearing talk about digital messing up the image, like doctoring, but I don't remember what it was determined to be.
I thought that I don't know whatever happened to that one, because where was this? Was this St. Simon's or Jekyll? Let me see where this was. Wolf Island. So, but this was the guy. Wolf Island. Oh, where it went. Wolf Island, Georgia, and he found this thing. Said it's like a Loch Ness type creature, but it is a wild looking thing. But I haven't heard any more about it. You know, it made all the rounds locally amongst all the Facebook people here.
Yeah, that is interesting. So, what are your thoughts on some of the other mythological, cryptozoological things that get classed at, like the Mothman? What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that's a real thing?
Oh, I think we lost him.
Did we lose him?
I think so.
Can you hear me?
Oh, there he is.
Now we can.
Sorry, my mic. I bumped my desk and my mic got unplugged.
Oh, okay.
So the Mothman. That's a big thing where I am. Ohio and West Virginia. That was the area where it was big in 66 and 67. And it's still a huge thing. There's a Mothman festival that averages about 14,000 visitors every year.
Wow.
Yeah, it's enormous. It's like the second biggest street. So
whoa, hold on one second. my hotspot, as soon as we started talking about the festival that draws 14,000 people, it cut off. So it interrupted. I don't know if the live stream's still. I hope the live stream's back up.
Technical difficulties, of course.
I know.
Right when we're finding out why he doesn't like the Mothman.
Oh man. See, usually this only happens to us when we're talking about conspiracies. Let's see.
Well, according to the best known, the most read book about the Mothman Prophecies by John Keel, when you talk about the Mothman, technical difficulties are not uncommon.
See?
Oh, well, it's happening. There it is.
We got the government after us.
We got to talk
Mothman.
about that then.
Yeah.
So, are we still recording?
I think we're still live.
Are we?
I think it went back up. I think it is.
All right.
We're still recording. We'll cut all this out for the back of the podcast.
Well, let me continue my answer.
All right. Go back to imagine we're just talking about yeah, it is still live. All right, so 14,000 people, Mothman, what's the rundown of the Mothman? What is the Mothman for those that don't know?
So the Mothman was this creature that was seen around Point Pleasant, West Virginia, and other parts of the Ohio Valley from November 1966 to December 1967. It was this large, black, dark-colored bird creature that was 6 to 10 foot tall, reported to have no head. It just had these two enormous red eyes and giant wings. And it was said to have a bad habit of just flying over cars and following them, kind of like what UFOs do. They buzzed them, just followed them. I think the Mothman. So it's hard to talk about the Mothman and not talk about this guy named John Keel.
Mm-hmm.
He is kind of this legendary figure in the world of cryptozoology and UFOs today. His books have effectively changed the field of cryptozoology and the field of ufology. He was the top guy investigating the Mothman, right?
Mhm.
He was on the ground for most of the wave of sightings. And then when it ended, he packed up, went home, and continued investigating weird stuff because he did it beforehand. But then in 1975, he wrote this book called The Mothman Prophecies. And the book kind of stayed hidden until the mid-90s, where for one reason or another, it just kind of shot into popularity. It is the book that's responsible for the Mothman mythos. Nearly everything that people associate with the Mothman probably didn't actually happen. It just came from the book, such as the men in black being involved, or the strange lights in the sky that happened at the same time, or the connection to the collapse of the Silver Bridge. Up until the book came out and John Keel started talking about how he felt that the Silver Bridge, the bridge that connected West Virginia and Ohio over the Ohio River at that town of Point Pleasant, when it collapsed in 1967, and after that there were no more Mothman sightings. Nobody connected it to the Mothman because they felt that the reason no one was seeing the Mothman was simply because no one wanted to talk about it after this tragedy that killed 47 people just happened. But John Keel decided that it's a good part. It's a good story, so he brought it in. And ever since that book came out, the Mothman has been not just a weird story of a handful of sightings of this weird creature. It was a phenomenon of this conspiracy and weird stuff with the men in black being involved in these strange lights in the sky. And John Keel was this intrepid investigator who was diligently trying to document and record this incident, while at every turn he was being thwarted by the men in black and these mysterious phone calls and these technical difficulties and having all these problems at his house. His house was raided several times, according to the book, all kinds of things. And when you read it, it reads less like a research book on the topic and more like a paranormal investigation novel about this paranoid man investigating this weird stuff and having all these other weird things happen to him because he's investigating this weird stuff. And all that stuff has become kind of this mythos around the Mothman, but it wasn't originally. The original story was just that this red-eyed bird thing was seen in the sky for, I think, 22 times in Point Pleasant and several other times around the country because it was popular at the time. Now you hear about any kind of weird flying creature sighting, and it's immediately the Mothman. There was this rash of sightings from late 2016 into early this year in Chicago that was really popularized, and they called it the Mothman of Chicago. Has Mothman returned in Chicago? Will there be another disaster like the Silver Bridge? That type of thing, when in fact, I'm pretty convinced at least the Chicago stories were hoaxes. Like people were just playing pranks and taking advantage of the researcher who was collecting them. There may have been one or two legit sightings, but most of them just sounded like hoaxes or misidentifications of drones associated with, like, they heard the Mothman story, so they saw something weird in the sky and said, oh, it's got to be the Mothman of Chicago. The actual sightings of Mothman in Point Pleasant, so where they were seen is along this lover's lane called the TNT area. It was this old World War II TNT production and storage facility. It was where most of the TNT used by America in World War II was built and stored. It's a really spooky place. I've been down there. It's really cool. At the time, it was used for teenagers and other young people to have parties, hang out, and since it was the 60s, do drugs and drink. Definitely the first four witnesses, there were four witnesses, the Scarberries and the Mallets, that saw this creature first. They were the ones that popularized it on November 15th, 66. And they were driving back from one of the things in the TNT area they were hanging out previously, and they see this thing, tall, black, bird-like creature, standing alongside the road. They pass it one of them turns around and they see that it's now flying above, slightly above behind the car. And they sped up, according to them, over 100 miles an hour. And it just kept flying right behind them. And once they got to town, it stopped and disappeared. They went to the police and said, "Hey, we saw this thing. It was terrifying." And bam, the Mothman was born. Actually, they called it the bird until a cheeky newspaper in Ohio heard about it and said, "Well, you know, the Batman TV show is pretty popular, so let's call it the Mothman." Yeah. The thing is, though, the Scarberrys and the Mallets were at an event, or they were at the TNT area where drinking and drugs happened. All four of them vehemently denied partaking or even doing that. But one has to wonder if they did and it affected what they saw, and they were freaked out and they saw something that they couldn't explain, and it turned into this story. Like I said previously, people are really awful witnesses, especially when they're scared in the dark. And what could actually be just a regular owl could be seen as this 8-foot tall, black, red-eyed winged creature. We're also really bad judges of speed and time and a million other things, distance and size. So any number of those factors could be inaccurate. That's why witness reports are not really useful or trustworthy in science. And actually in the legal sphere, witness reports are getting less and less emphasis now because of so many problems. I think that at this point, Mothman is not a cryptid. It is a cultural phenomenon. It is folklore at its very finest. Just like Slender Man or the Scary Clowns. There's no real mystery behind it. It's just this story that has been built up and built up and built up. What makes it different, though, is there are so many people still today that claim that they're Mothman researchers and they're going to find the truth about Mothman, when even if they did see something mysterious, it was so long ago and none of the original witnesses are alive as far as I know, that we can never really figure out what it is. But there's some pretty plausible explanations and answers for it.
So what's like one of the stranger cryptids that you believe does exist?
Well, I don't believe any of these exist, but at the same time, I don't believe that any of them don't exist. I need evidence first. I need to see footprints and hair, and I basically judge things on the same accord that science does.
So what has the best evidence right now?
My opinion of what has the best evidence is the thylacine, the Tasmanian tiger in Tasmania. It was this marsupial predator that kind of looked like a dog with stripes on its back. That went extinct. It was killed off in the 30s. But there's been a lot of expeditions out there to look for evidence, and one of the organizations I'm a part of and I work closely with, I'm actually the regional representative for this area. For it, the Center for Fortean Zoology, we've sent out 5 or 6 expeditions and have collected some really good evidence, some of which we haven't released yet, because we're waiting to get verification for a lot of it. But I've seen it, and it's convincing to at least me. And I have a pretty high standard. I'm not sure when it will come out. And yes, lots of researchers say this. I've seen the evidence, I've seen the videos, I've seen the pictures, and they're absolutely convincing. So I don't expect anybody to believe me or trust me about that specifically, because I cannot prove it. It's just personally, I think there's a good chance. I'd be willing to bet even 60% chance that it's still around.
What was the recent video of it? There's something very recent where they felt that they spotted one.
Yeah, that was a fox with mange.
Was it?
You know, the funniest thing about this is the fact that we were before the podcast started, I said, "Oh, I wonder if we'll talk about the thylacine."
Yeah.
Which is funny that you brought it up.
It's a huge thing in the crypto community. It's at this point, with researchers that don't just do Bigfoot, it's bigger than Bigfoot right now. Like, we talk about that more because it's exciting, and a lot of researchers think it's more likely. And also, a lot of us get scientific backing for the expeditions and support, and scientists are more willing to listen about the thylacine than they are, say, Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster. And yeah, I completely understand about the Loch Ness Monster.
I've
something
always
like
been
this
interested
living
in
in
the
Australia
thylacine
seems.
stuff.
Oh,
We have no screen share, by the way. At least I don't.
oh, the screen share went away.
Yeah.
All right, hold on. Let me pull that up. What I was something like this seems very plausible in like a dense in such dense vegetation, limited population.
Yeah. It's a better place for something to hide, especially something smaller than like America with Bigfoot. It's just generally a better area.
And now, where are they seeing? Are they seeing them? Are the sightings in Australia or?
No, Tasmania. It's an island underneath. There are some sightings of the thylacine on in mainland Australia.
Because they were in Australia at one point.
Yes, 40,000 years ago.
Okay.
Even various tribes of Aborigines that are talked to about it say that they were killed off.
So if they were killed off mainland, but they survived in Tasmania.
Yes, that's exactly what happened.
Up until 80 some years ago.
Yes.
So that's a very good possibility if they were killed off of the mainland and survived in Tasmania.
Well, they were killed off in Tasmania in the 30s. The ones in the mainland were killed off 40,000 years ago, approximately. If I'm remembering the times right, I might be slightly off.
Right, but some lived in a secluded area. So it's
in Tasmania.
Right. So if it happened before, seems like it could happen again.
Yeah.
That's a pretty wild looking animal.
Yeah, they actually Willem Dafoe. They had that movie. What was that movie where he hunted one?
He hunted one.
Yeah. What was? It was like.
We'll find out.
No, I don't think there's an H in his name.
There you go. Willem.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think.
The Hunter. That's it. That was it. Yeah. He like shot. He went to like find the last one, and then when he found it, he shot it, and then he cried. It was a horrible movie.
Sounds like
The thylacine's really interesting. So they hopped like a kangaroo, for speed. But most of the pictures and depictions we have are of them walking because that was what they did when they were in captivity. We don't actually have videos, as far as I know, of them hopping, but we do have field reports of that happening.
What do you think that is?
That looks like a fox or something to me, personally. I don't know. Videos are just difficult to judge.
Yeah.
They also, thylacines were really neat. They could open their jaws. I think it was to 170 degrees.
Wow. So this thing's just a marsupial.
For reference, that is 5 degrees higher than hippos can open their jaws, which is they have the largest opening of a largest degree opening of a living mammal that we know of now. See, that was a good example.
Yeah.
But they can make it even further if they try. It's
What's
incredible.
this thing like closest? The closest relative of this would be
Tasmanian, the Tasmanian devil.
okay.
Because it's a marsupial, and all marsupials are interrelated. So, like, for example,
scenes of marsupial.
yep,
Yeah, so it looks like a cross between a dog and a rat.
sort of, yeah. They were called the Tasmanian tiger, Tasmanian wolf. I like thylacine better. But
Now, are there any of them where I don't think I've ever seen one where the stripes go more than halfway up it.
no, that's exactly what they look like as far as we know. That was exactly. The striping only went up to their mid back at most.
Well, it would be cool to see in the future that they, kind of came back and have a thriving population of them again. That'd be pretty
regardless of if they still exist, there are initiatives to clone them to bring them back, because Tasmania is kind of having a hard time with predators, because the Tasmanian devils are all dying out because of a ear disease. So they're rapidly losing predators, which is causing problems. So they're trying to bring back, not just save the Tasmanian devils, but also bring back the thylacine to kind of help keep down the preys. Sort of. We don't have a lot of thylacine DNA. There was not a lot of ones preserved. There are 2 fetuses preserved and 1 baby, and a handful of hares, but I think that's about the extent of it for the thylacines. So they're trying.
What have we successfully...
It's being worked on, but it's actually less likely than mammoths.
The only thing that was successfully brought back like that wasn't it a frog, an extinct frog that they brought back by cloning?
Gastric brooding frog. Yes, those guys are awesome. I think they're also from Australia, but that might be wrong.
Yep, Queensland.
Yep.
So they brought these things back.
Yep. Because they were an integral part of the area that they lived in.
Wow. So when they cloned it, so they produced...
So what they did was, these guys weren't like extinct, like they weren't completely dead. They had a handful of surviving individuals, which is what's known as... living extinct. So they're still alive, but there's no way of using natural reproduction to bring them back. So they used the DNA of all the different individuals to clone them and start a larger breeding population.
Wow, it is wild. And that's about it, though, with the attempts of have there been any other cloning attempts that have been successful? Not like sheep, but bringing anything back.
Right. I think there was a type of mountain goat or some kind of related ungulate that was attempted. I don't remember if it was successful or not. And actually, they impregnated an Asian elephant with a mammoth fetus, a cloned mammoth fetus, but I don't think it survived.
Really?
Like
wow, I never heard that. That's crazy.
Now that's interesting. Let's
let's look that one up. That sounds interesting. That's the kind of crazy stuff we like to hear about.
So
at least they attempted it. I don't know if they were successful in creating the fetus,
right?
But they attempted it. It obviously didn't work one way or another, because we haven't heard anything more about it.
Right. Yeah,
they're like, sweep that one under the rug.
You really wonder, but like what you said also, you cannot, the possibility of bringing back a dinosaur is almost impossible because our climate's completely different.
Well, also the latest dinosaurs existed was 65 million years ago. That's past the survival of DNA generally. So like the way they brought them back in Jurassic Park is not possible. The blood in the amber, in the mosquito in the amber, is not enough for them to bring back, even if the DNA did survive, but the DNA would have decayed anyway.
Right.
Didn't they just recently find fatty tissue on a T-Rex skeleton?
Yeah, I think so. So we have a handful of pieces of skin of different types of dinosaurs. So certain things can survive, but generally there's not. Generally, the DNA does not survive, and a lot of it is like imprints, or it fossilized itself, or is preserved in a different way.
Let's see. Live Science has something here I'm looking at right now. T-Rex,
Should have been looking at
fatty tissue, red blood cells.
I don't see it. We're just doing a quick search. I don't see anything popping up.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot on it.
Well, that probably means that they collected it, but the study's still going on to confirm.
Yeah.
And they're still trying to prove that it actually is. So
Yeah.
what that means, basically what that means is the scientific paper isn't out yet, if they did collect it.
Yeah.
It can take 2 to 3 years after they actually find something to get it into the news, because they're proving it, writing the paper about it, determining if it is, determining the significance, writing the things about it before, it gets into the media.
It's very interesting.
Yeah. Yep. So, yeah, this is that video. See what you think of this.
Oh, we got to watch at least a couple of good. We love watching this kind of stuff. This
one is interesting.
This is a skunk ape.
Skunk ape.
Let's see. Is there any audio?
Yeah, let me pull up the audio.
Of course. This is where I accidentally stopped recording. That's where the guy needed a break and had to take the mask off for a little bit.
It kind of looks like a bear to me, almost.
Before we end this, I have to share my experience.
Now, this thing turns around at some point.
Huh?
There are black bear in Florida.
Yep.
This is where somewhere this thing turns, though. Let's see. And that's the part that looks pretty wild. And for those listening, this is YouTube. I think I saw a skunk ape. Please help.
Why wouldn't you zoom in on it a little? Oh, yeah. It's fake.
That was it, man. For that part right
That
there.
was it.
It like turns.
It's fake.
It like it gets up and that's it. It stands
That's
up.
it.
It kind of looks like a bear to me, a little bit.
Could be. Could be a man.
If this guy is genuine, it looks like he just saw a bear. But it's not out of the question that he's just messing with us.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's very very plausible.
Well, before we end this, I gotta share my story here.
Yeah.
So I had an encounter. This would be back late 90s, I guess. Late 90s, early 2000s. And me and my brother are sitting at our old house. Do you remember how our old house, the layout was, Billy?
Yeah.
When you look out the back, there was a lot of big windows, so you were looking out into the woods.
Yep.
And this probably would have been trying to think. This was before we had horses. So it would have been late 90s, 98, 99. And so my dad had a large pile of land where he was clearing because we were actually going to build. We were going to build a barn and a fence for the horses, and my dad was clearing land. We had an old pit, kind of like right on the verge of the woods in the backyard, and that was where my dad would get filled dirt from, and so there was a big pile. There was multiple piles of wood back there, and there were some piles of dirt, random here and there. Me and my brother are sitting there. We're like watching TV or something, and this is like middle of the day, and so we look out the back window, and I keep seeing something large. The walking behind a pile that was probably the pile of wood was probably in the ballpark of 8 to 9 feet tall, and whatever this was, we'd only catch a glimpse of it as it walked between the two piles, and could distinctly see hair. And that was about it. It was just a large, dark shape, back and forth. And I just remember watching it, and my brother being like, I don't know what it is, but he was like, kind of like lost interest in it. Like for a little while, we kept watching it, and would just go back and forth between the two piles fairly quickly. And I looked down, I was like, you see it? And he was like, yeah, I see it. And I was like, I see it too. Like something is there. And, so we kind of waited, and then we didn't see it anymore. And then, so we went back to look to see if we could like find anything. And at first there was like really no traces of anything. And I didn't even tell anybody about it other than my brother. It was just kind of like, whatever we saw, I can't explain it. This is whatever. Now, mind you, this is before we knew that there were bears in New Jersey. So, I go back there, don't really find anything. And then, so the next day, we go back, me and my brother, we do stuff out we go hiking around in the woods, and we go out to this pit of dirt that was right on the edge of the woods. And, we kind of crossed through there to go up into the woods. And as we're going down, it had rained that night, the night that we had seen whatever we'd seen. And then the next day, the pit was that just soft red dirt. And there was a set of tracks that looked like they had been rained on, but not so much that they were completely deformed. And the tracks were elongated, kind of human-esque looking. And, but you could see where there was a definitive, almost like a long claw where it would have touched the dirt. And we looked at it. I think we took pictures of it, but that was like early digital camera, maybe some early point and shoot stuff. I don't remember. I couldn't tell you where the picture's at. So anyway, we seen it. That was pretty much the extent of it. We did find some strange hair here and there. But I always kind of just discounted it as possible horsehair from the farm next door to us that maybe blew into a tree. But it was weird that it was always at like maybe head height, and we would randomly find this stuff in kind of the same area. But so anyway, that was pretty much the extent of what we seen. And I, to this day, I chalk it up as we seen a bear. And that track was a deformed bear track, a track that had been deformed by the rain and just looked like a human. But it was definitely interesting. There were things about it that didn't look like a bear, but then again, a bear could do something that I don't really, I can't really explain. So, but it was just an interesting encounter that we had that we saw. And like I said, I'm fairly rational when it comes to the woods. So I'm going to chalk it up as we've seen a black bear.
So bears, when they walk, their back feet tend to land halfway into where their front feet just left, causing double tracks.
Mhm.
which then if rain distorts it could plausibly look like a larger human's footprint because bears' feet actually kind of do look like people's,
Right.
minus like the claws.
Mhm.
So it is completely plausible that you did see a bear.
Yeah.
Um,
Now the interesting thing was
Hmm.
that um, the actual yeah, look at that.
That is
Bear's
wild.
foot does look like a Bigfoot track.
It does, doesn't it?
Yep.
I mean, it's just so most likely these Bigfoot tracks are just bear tracks.
yeah, probably.
I mean, it just looks like a. I mean, looks like a giant human foot. I've never looked
Right,
at a bear foot like that.
Yeah, if you look at it, I mean, so if a bear was to put that whole pad down, because normally they're walking on like the ball of their foot, right?
Mhm.
So if they were to put the whole thing down, that looks a lot like a human track.
Yep.
The yeah, I kind of almost have to just chalk it up to the bear we seen might have been standing on 2 feet, which would account for the excessive height. Yeah, that looks actually go back to that.
What is that? It's just somebody made a
Yeah, but see the
human
ones
foot
on the
morphing
bottom
into a bear foot.
are fairly similar to what we saw.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think we just saw a bear. But we like to just call it the Bigfoot story.
I never
Yeah.
saw.
It's fun.
I don't think I've ever seen. I don't think I ever saw a bear when I was in New Jersey. I haven't seen a bear here. I've never seen a bear in the
I've seen
wild.
one bear. I've seen one bear in the wild, for sure. That I confirmed. No, it was a bear that I had good eyes on. A black bear, but
I've
other
seen a
than
lot
that,
of
I haven't
gators
seen-
though.
Yeah,
Bears are all over the place and they're pretty good at hiding. Like even if like you're hiking down a trail and a bear is within your view, they can stay so still and so quiet that you won't hear it. Generally it's just luck if you see one unless you're being threatening toward it, and then you're definitely going to see it. And
Yeah.
that'll probably be the last thing you see. But yeah, bears are all over the place. They're definitely in New Jersey. They're in this area. They're
They're down
they,
here,
they de- yeah.
southeast Georgia, when the Okefenokee Swamp. Every once in a while, lightning strikes, lights it on fire, and we had, was it last year or the year before? I'm trying to think if it was November of, when was that? It's weird, man. The Okefenokee Swamp. Have you ever been down this way?
I have, but I've never been to the swamp.
It is an awesome.
I've heard of it.
It is awesome. I think that the swamp itself is like the size of Rhode Island. It's just this
Oh,
huge
wow.
swamp, and you can get into a boat or a canoe and just head out into the swamp, but you're kind of on your own once you get out there. But it's every once in a while lightning strikes and burns a large portion of the swamp down, and that's just the natural cycle to keep it from overgrowing. And
Yeah.
when it lights up, I mean, I'm probably 40 minute drive from the swamp, but you'll just have ash raining down on you for weeks, and it's
Oh,
just all
yeah,
smoky.
definitely.
It's just wild. But our neighbors, in I think it was 2007, there was a bad fire, and when that one happened, I think it was 07, 09, somewhere in there. But they had so our woods. I mean, you're talking a 40-mile hike through the woods, crossing some streets and things to get over to the swamp. But when that thing started and kicked off, they had gators migrating through the yard, bears migrating through the, like, things are just getting out of the way and move. I mean, they move. And people down here, it's interesting. My neighbor down the road, he had a little pond he dug. He dug like it's kind of like what you were talking about with animals migrating and moving around. And people don't think that they would, go far distances, but they will. But he had a little pond, and the thing was only, maybe 20 foot across, 15 feet across. It was just a small pond, and he had a couple horses. And one day the horses ran through a fence. He had like a 2x6 fence. They busted through the fence and took off. And he was trying to figure out what it was. And as he's walking, looking at the fence line and trying to figure out how he's going to catch these horses that are heading down the road, there's a 10-foot gator in the pond. Now, this gator, to get to this pond, had to traverse a couple miles of woods, to get from the river into the pond. And this thing just decided to go for a walk, and through the woods it goes and finds a little pond and settles down into it.
Gators can move pretty fast. I think if they, for short periods of time, or if they're panicked, they can move 15 miles an hour.
Oh, they're nuts. We were watching a video yesterday. We were doing a podcast, and it was the video of a gator that head butted and knocked out the trapper when he's loading it into the back of a pickup truck. Have you seen that one?
No, I don't think I have.
Yeah, it was real recent here, within the last week or so.
Yeah, look at it. It's crazy, because you'll realize he gets this gator. He's going to pick it up.
It happened so quick.
Oh, missed it.
Oh, you went too far.
Yep. Here it is.
Gators are scary.
Yeah.
Boom.
Watch this. Boom.
I mean,
Knocked
this thing.
him out cold.
They're strong.
Yeah.
They have to be strong. Their whole hunting thing is they latch on with their mouth. They drag it down into the water and spin until it's dead.
Right.
Yep, that death roll.
Mm-hmm.
I helped load I went down to the White Oak Creek up the road from me, and I was fishing and talking to this guy, and he was in his 90s, early 90s. And we're just sitting there talking, and he said, "Oh, I'm waiting for my son to get back. I got to help him load a gator." And I said, "Oh, man, this is going to be interesting." And he came rolling up in his John boat, dragging a gator behind him. And I think it ended up being about 11 foot long, and we estimated maybe 600 pounds. It took 3 of us, me, for an old guy, 90-some years old. That guy was strong. He's just one of those southern boys out in the woods surviving. Him, myself, and his son picking this thing up with a ratchet strap wrapped around it, with a guy in the back of the pickup truck ratcheting it as we're just trying to slowly get it up into the bed of the truck. And because we have gator hunting season opens, I think it's August, and it's maybe 6 weeks long. And because they're starting to get overpopulated.
Yeah, they used to be really endangered.
Right. Florida has a big problem with them. We're starting to get overpopulated with them, and more stories of them being in residential neighborhoods and washing up on the beaches and this, but man, that thing, I put my foot up next to it, my foot, and in a shoe, it's about, I don't know, a foot, 12 inches, 13 inches long, with a sneaker on, and my foot to the back of this thing's head, I could have put 3 feet. It was about a 3 foot, 3 foot long from this thing's neck to the snout. It's just his head. I'm like, this is a massive animal, man. Just a crazy animal. And, but they taste good. You ever eat one?
Oh yeah, I was down in Florida last year for a conference, and we went to the Everglades, and we had gator nuggets and gator salad.
They're good, man.
Yeah, oh yeah.
It's like a mixture. It's people wonder. It's kind of like, to me, a cross between chicken and shrimp.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of is, yeah. We got a little restaurant by my house down here. It's right by the river, and you can get gator balls and or a gator sandwich, and it's pretty good.
And I always find with alligators, it's fascinating how they kind of have this northern migration where they've been pushing. So far, they're 12 miles south of the North Carolina-Virginia border. Like, that's how far up they are.
Yeah.
They've pushed, and then they've learned how to adapt into like freezing ponds and different bodies of water where they'll stick their snout just up above the water line, and they'll freeze.
You see the images of the ones in ice down in Florida this year?
It's crazy. They'll
that
freeze
was wild.
into it. Yeah, let me see if I can pull one up.
Yeah, and where they're cold-blooded, they just sit dormant until it basically.
Yeah, this is what they'll do.
Yeah.
And just sit there and freeze in and just wait.
Mm-hmm.
it is pretty wild. The other thing that's interesting, have you come across in Ohio any armadillos?
No.
Yeah, we're getting
coming up?
them in Kentucky quite a bit.
I heard that.
Yeah, I've seen quite a few of them so far.
Those things are moving.
Yep. It is interesting.
Well, we've been.
What do you say, Jones? This has been a long one.
This has been a good one. We're 2 hours into it.
Yeah. So, you want to plug anything there, Colin?
Yeah, I have a so you can find me on Facebook. That's where I'm most active at, just crypto-kid. That's where I post most of my stuff. Yeah, right there.
There it is.
And then my blog is paranorm101.blogspot.com. Yeah, right there. And I used to have a radio show that's not running anymore, but I am working on putting up a series of podcasts that I have a bit hush-hush right now. I'm going to announce more about them next Friday on my Facebook page. So if your listeners are interested, they can just find me there and find the information there when it comes out. So I do all kinds of stuff, but all of it is always put up and linked on my Facebook page if they're interested. So
Very
yeah,
cool.
man, it was good talking to you.
definitely, I had a great time.
This has been, and even what's kind of interesting is going into it, we didn't really know who you were. So learning about you, finding out what's interesting to you, and then finding out more that you really are interested in more of the scientific side than the mythological side of animals. And and that's been cool. We'll have to have you back because we love talking. It's one that we always love talking about animals, and we'll every even our political podcasts when we're doing just kind of a straight politics show and discussing current events, we always have some crazy animal story that's popping up.
Yeah. If you look at our show titles, I think there's several of them with some sort of animal in the title.
Yep. Because but it's wild and it's enjoyable. Like that's something. I have a lot of animals and I have to take care of a lot of animals, and I'm probably up to, I don't know, $300 or $400 a month in just feeding these different things that I've been collecting. But it's enjoyable, man. Animals are they're just an awesome, I don't know what it is, but walk outside. I love walking outside, quiet in the woods, hear the goats going off, hear the horses going off, hear the guinea hens going off and ducks quacking. And you're just like, man, this is nice.
Oh yeah, definitely. Animals are fascinating. I'm planning on going into zoology. I'm planning on starting with working at zoos, but I want to extend into field research, studying the behavior of certain animals.
Very cool, man.
That would be awesome. Well, this has been a good one. We'll have to have you back on soon.
It definitely, just let me know. I am more than happy to talk animals and cryptids, and actually, I also do UFOs and other paranormal stuff. So if you're interested in that too,
well, we definitely
we're gonna get you back on.
UFO.
We'll get you back on for a UFO show. Then we'll.
I'd love to.
We love to talk about.
And something we should do would be fun is just gather up a bunch of crazy animal clips on YouTube, and then we'll just have a fun show. Playing them and commentating on what's going on.
We'll commentate. Yeah.
Now, do you hunt?
No, I don't hunt. It's not that I don't have anything against it. I'm just personally not a fan of guns. Like, I don't mind if others have guns. It's just not for me.
Yeah.
We're big gun guys. We have a lot of guns.
Yeah.
we got quite a few guns. Be out here in Southeast Georgia, man. It's they're working on building the sheriff's department's building the range down the road from me. And a couple miles down the road. And this year was the first year where I set up a little deer blind and trying to harvest my own food, my own meat. Wasn't successful though. Not like
it's
Holmes.
not easy.
You get them every time though, man.
Not every time. I like to be out in the woods, but I'll tell you what, if you don't like guns, try your bow and arrow, something a little more primitive.
Yeah, I used to be in Boy Scouts, and I was really into bows and arrows for a while. Honestly, I mainly don't hunt just because I don't have the time. Doing my shows and research and writing all the time and stuff, so it
Now
just
what-
gets busy.
Yeah. I know how that goes. We both run businesses, and it's hard to make time, but we always make time for our podcast. We got to do that.
Yeah, gotta get this
We have-
podcast going. Now, but with guns, have you shot? Like, have you gone to shooting and?
Yeah. I got the rifleman merit badge in Boy Scouts, and I was trained and certified in the Boy Scout thing. So yeah, I have shot before. It's just not my thing.
Yeah, it's something. That's what I kind of am looking forward with that range. If they get a 200-yard range, and just hone a rifle in, it's
an art. It takes
It
some
is.
skill.
I gotta learn. I
Mhm.
gotta learn better.
Yep.
Well, man,
So-
it has been good. I really enjoyed this one. So we'll be putting it up as soon as we can. The YouTube stream, as soon as we're done. I mean, it's just up. So if you want to share that, and the podcast will
Definitely.
be going up soon. And until next time,
Go out there, shoot guns, use some chainsaws, go look for cryptids in the woods.
that's what we end every show with. Go out there, shoot some guns, and use chainsaws. Came for the first podcast we did. I have set up an Alaskan chainsaw mill, and I've been milling my own lumber. And man, I was fascinated one day. I said, man, there's no greater tool on earth than a chainsaw.
It is, man.
Like-
It's such.
Like
You can do
we've
so
been
much
running
with it.
fence out in the woods, and we're running fence, and I'm just running a tractor. We've been clearing a path to get the tractor through, and then put T-posts in the ground, and we'll come across like a tree. It's like a 12-inch diameter tree that's just in the way. And when we first ride up to it, my wife's first reaction is like, "Oh, we're kind of stuck. Can't get the." I'm like, "What are you talking about? Just grab the
Yeah.
chainsaw, man. I just pulled out the back of the truck. Done. Tree. You think about that. A 30, 40-foot tree, 12 inches in diameter, is down in 20 seconds.
Well, don't cut them all down. I like the woods.
I got to cut most of these down. I'm leaving a couple live oaks, but got to make pasture land for the donkeys.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey,
So,
so we'll talk to everybody next time. We'll have more podcasts coming at you. And Quando Omni Fluncus Moritati, everybody.
see ya.
And that tag, we're done recording.
Yeah.
Let me
Do you know
shut
what
off the
that
live
means,
stream.
Colin?